He asked her for a divorce on their anniversary. She thought she was walking into a celebration of 12 years together. Instead, she walked into the worst night of her life, humiliated in front of people who were supposed to be family. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman crying in that parking lot was about to uncover a secret that would burn his entire world to the ground. If you want to know what happened next, type here, and let me know where you're watching from. Subscribe and stay until the end, because this story doesn't let go easily. Claire Bennett woke up at 4 in the morning, the way she always did now. Her husband's side of the bed had been cold for weeks. Nathan told her he was staying late at the office, closing some big deal, sleeping on the pull-out couch there so he wouldn't wake her when he finally came home. She had believed him, mostly, until she found a woman's earring wedged in the seam of his car seat and a charge on his card for a hotel 40 minutes from his office. She told herself it meant nothing. 12 years of marriage didn't disappear over an earring. Today was different. Today was their anniversary, and Nathan had done something he never did anymore. He'd planned something. A reservation at Lumiere, the restaurant on the top floor of the glass tower downtown, the kind of place where a bottle of wine cost more than she made in 2 days managing the front desk at a physical therapy clinic. He'd texted her the address and one line: "Wear the green dress. Tonight matters." She showered slowly. She pulled the green dress from the back of the closet, the one she'd worn on their honeymoon, still fitting almost the same after all these years. She did her makeup carefully, softly, the way she used to when she still believed every day with him was worth dressing up for. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a woman about to be discarded. She saw hope, and hope, she would learn, is the most dangerous thing a person can carry into a room full of wolves. Before heading downtown, she stopped by her mother's small house on the east side, the way she did most mornings. Dorothy Hale sat in her recliner by the window, her swollen knuckles resting on a blanket she'd knitted herself. When she saw Claire dressed up, glowing, something tightened in her face. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Too beautiful for a man who's been sleeping somewhere else." Claire knelt beside the chair, resting her head on her mother's lap like she was a girl again. "Maybe tonight changes everything. Maybe he remembers who we used to be." Dorothy stroked her daughter's hair with fingers bent by arthritis. "Men don't forget who they were, Claire. They just stop pretending." But Claire was already standing, already kissing her mother's forehead, already telling her that tonight would be different, that she could feel it. Lumiere occupied the entire top floor, wrapped in glass that turned the city lights into a golden blur. The elevator smelled like money, leather, and expensive perfume. When the doors opened, Claire stepped into a world of white tablecloths and quiet, polished laughter, the kind of laughter that belonged to people who never had to check a price before ordering. A hostess with a severe blonde bun checked her list. "Reservation for Bennett, table with Mr. Bennett's party." Party. Claire's stomach turned at the word, but she followed anyway, weaving between tables until she saw him. Nathan wasn't alone. Beside him sat his mother, Patricia Bennett, her hair dyed the color of dark wine, spine straight as a blade. Across from her sat a striking woman in cream silk, pale and polished, the kind of beauty that belonged on the cover of an architecture magazine, Alexandra Cole. And at the head of the table, cutting into his steak without looking up, sat Alexandra's father, Reginald Cole, a man whose eyes were the color of old ice. Claire froze. Nathan stood and waved her over with a smile that didn't match his eyes. "There she is. Come here, honey, I want you to meet some people." His voice was wrong. It wasn't the voice of her husband. It was the voice he used when he was closing a deal. She sat in the only open chair, the one farthest from the window, the one closest to nothing. Patricia gave her the smallest nod possible. Alexandra's eyes swept over Claire's dress the way someone inspects a stain on a tablecloth. Reginald didn't look up at all. No one spoke to her. The conversation continued around her like she was a piece of furniture that had wandered into frame by accident. Nathan talked about a development project, about historic neighborhoods being revitalized, about land that would triple in value within 2 years. Alexandra nodded slowly, crossing her legs. Patricia laughed at exactly the right moments, touching her son's arm every time he said something that sounded impressive. Claire stared at her empty place setting. No menu had been brought to her. No one had asked what she wanted to drink. She felt, for the first time in 12 years of marriage, like a stranger who had wandered into the wrong life. Then Nathan stood, lifted his wine glass, and tapped it gently with his fork. The restaurant went quiet, the way rooms do when someone with money asks for attention. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, smiling at the crowded tables around him. 12 years ago today, I married Claire." Claire's heart leapt. Maybe this was it. Maybe the kind words were finally coming. 12 years, Nathan continued, is a long time. Long enough to know exactly when something has run its course. The air left the room. Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He set it down gently on the table, right in front of Claire, like a gift wrapped in silence. "This is my anniversary present," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed restaurant. "Divorce papers. Because I finally understand that I married someone who was never going to grow with me." Claire opened the envelope. Her fingers didn't shake. She simply couldn't feel them anymore. Inside were pages full of legal language, and at the bottom, a line waiting for her signature. Everything was already prepared. He had chosen this place, this date, these witnesses. "I spent 12 years tied to a woman with no ambition," Nathan went on, and now there was something almost cruel creeping into his tone, like a man finally allowing himself to say what he'd been holding back for years. "A woman who's content answering phones at a clinic instead of building something real. A woman who never understood that I was meant for more than this." Patricia sighed, the sound of someone finally setting down a heavy bag. "I always knew, Nathan. I always knew Claire wasn't at your level. She looks like the help, not a wife." Alexandra lowered her eyes, but the corner of her mouth curled just slightly. Reginald kept eating, but now he studied Claire with the same expression he might give an old building scheduled for demolition. Appraising, indifferent, already calculating the cost of tearing it down. Claire closed the envelope. She stood up slowly. She said nothing. She didn't cry, didn't raise her voice. She simply walked between the tables holding the envelope against her chest, while the other diners watched her with pity or with a curiosity that felt almost cruel. Outside, the October air hit her face like a slap. The city lights sprawled below the glass tower, indifferent to what had just happened 20 floors up. Claire leaned against the cold window wall and closed her eyes, trying to remember how to breathe. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She answered without thinking. "Mrs. Claire Bennett? This is Daniel Ford. I'm the attorney for Mrs. Margaret Ashworth. I'm very sorry to inform you, Mrs. Ashworth passed away tonight. Before she died, she left very specific instructions. I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. It's urgent." Claire lowered the phone. The envelope was still pressed against her chest, and now Margaret was gone. The only person who had ever made her feel like she mattered. She got to her mother's house past midnight. The door was unlocked. Dorothy never slept until she knew her daughter had made it home safe. She was sitting in the living room, the television dark, her hands folded in her lap. When she saw Claire walk in with the crumpled white envelope, she didn't ask a single question. She simply opened her arms. Claire collapsed against her mother's chest. This time, she cried. She cried the way she had as a little girl when the other kids laughed at her secondhand shoes. She cried like she had the day her father left and never came back. She cried until her voice gave out. Dorothy rocked her slowly, saying nothing, because words don't help when the world has just cracked open. Claire didn't sleep. She lay on the couch with her eyes open, staring at the water-stained ceiling, thinking about Margaret Ashworth. The old woman had lived alone in that enormous house near the river, in a neighborhood that used to belong to old immigrant families and was now surrounded by glass towers. When Claire first started as her home aide, Margaret barely spoke. She just stared out the window like she was waiting for someone who would never arrive. But slowly, Margaret began to talk. She talked about her late husband, about friends long gone, about a city she no longer recognized. And she talked about fear. "I'm scared, Claire," she'd said one night as Claire measured out her evening medication. "Men in nice suits keep coming with papers. They tell me a woman alone can't take care of a property this big. But this house has my name on it. It has my memories in it. If I sell it, what's left of me?" Claire had squeezed her hand. "No one is going to force you to sell anything, Mrs. Ashworth. I'm here." The old woman had smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You're good, Claire. Too good. That's exactly why they're going to hurt you." At 7 in the morning, Claire got up, washed her face with cold water, and put on yesterday's clothes because she didn't have the strength to change. Dorothy made coffee and toast, but Claire could only manage the coffee. She walked downtown to an old brick building where Daniel Ford's office waited for her. The attorney was maybe 50, gray threading through dark hair, a tired but not unkind expression on his face. He shook Claire's hand and offered her a seat. His office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Bennet. I know how much you cared for Mrs. Ashworth." Claire nodded. She still couldn't speak. Daniel opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. "Mrs. Ashworth came to see me 4 weeks ago. She was completely of sound mind. She revised her will legally, notarized, and left very specific instructions concerning you." Claire looked at him, uncomprehending. Daniel took a breath. "Mrs. Ashworth left you the River House, completely, along with a substantial portion of her savings to maintain it. Everything is filed with the county." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "No, that can't be right. I never asked her for anything. I only—" Daniel raised a hand gently. "Mrs. Bennet, she wasn't confused. She told me exactly why she was doing this. Would you like me to read you her words?" Claire nodded, and Daniel pulled out a page written in shaky but deliberate handwriting. "Claire Bennet was the only person who treated me like a human being in the last years of my life. Not like a burden. Not like a signature. Not like an obstacle. While everyone else waited for me to die quickly so they could take my things, she treated me like I still mattered. That is why I leave her my house, because I know she will care for it the way she cared for me." Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. Daniel set the letter down gently. "I know this is a lot to take in, Mrs. Bennet, especially after, well, I understand you're going through something difficult personally." Claire looked up. "How do you know about that?" Daniel's mouth tightened. "This city is smaller than people think in certain circles. I already heard about the divorce, and I'm sorry to say, word of this inheritance is going to spread just as fast." Claire stood up. The room spun. "I need air." Daniel rose as well. "Take whatever time you need. But there's something important you should know. The River House isn't just a beautiful property. It's a historic house in an area that a lot of developers want badly. Mrs. Ashworth turned down several offers in the last few months. Insistent offers." "Who wanted to buy it?" Claire asked. Daniel hesitated. "I can't give you names yet. But be careful. There are powerful people who are not going to be happy about this news." Claire walked out of the building. The divorce envelope was still crumpled in her hand, stained with dried tears. The morning sun stabbed at her eyes. She leaned against the corner of the building, breathing hard, trying to make sense of it all. In 24 hours she had lost a husband and gained a house. She had no idea which one terrified her more. "So you're the caretaker who stole from my aunt." Claire turned. A man in his mid-30s stood in front of her, thin, light brown hair, green eyes bright with fury, wearing expensive clothes that looked slept in. Trevor Ashworth. The nephew who never once visited Margaret while she was alive. And he was about to make sure the entire street heard every word he had to say. Trevor Ashworth wasn't whispering. He was performing, and he made sure the whole street turned to watch. "You wormed your way into a sick old woman's life and manipulated her out of everything she owned." His voice climbed with every word, bouncing off the buildings around them. Claire backed up until she hit the wall. "I didn't do anything wrong. I only took care of her." Trevor stepped closer, jabbing a finger at her. "Took care of her, or poisoned her mind against her own family. My aunt was 80 years old, confused, and you were there every single day filling her head with lies, telling her we didn't love her." A woman coming out of the bakery stopped, a bag of bread still in her hand. A man sweeping his shop floor leaned his broom against the wall. 2 young women pulled out their phones and started filming. "I never said anything bad about you," Claire said, her throat tight. "I was only there when she was scared, when she was in pain." "Scared of what?" Trevor shouted. Scared of her own family, that's what you told her. Of course you were there. If you stuck around long enough, patted her hand, said the right sweet things, eventually she'd leave you something. That's what vultures do. Daniel Ford stepped out of the office building at the sound of the commotion. Mr. Ashworth, this isn't the place for this. If you have a legal grievance, file it properly. Trevor sneered. Of course. The lawyers bought too. How convenient. Daniel said nothing, just moved to stand beside Claire, silent and steady. Trevor took a breath, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand as though he were crying, though his eyes stayed dry the whole time. This isn't over. I'm going to fight every cent. I'm going to prove my aunt wasn't in her right mind, and everyone is going to know exactly what kind of woman you really are. He turned, walked to the corner, and before disappearing, shouted one last word. Thief. The girls lowered their phones. The bakery woman shook her head and went inside. The man went back to sweeping, but now he watched Claire with suspicion. Claire walked back to her mother's house feeling eyes on her back the whole way. Meanwhile, in a glass office on the 20th floor of a downtown tower, Nathan Bennett was having coffee with Alexandra Cole. He was still smiling, savoring the humiliation from the night before. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Patricia. Claire inherited the River House. The whole thing. Nathan stopped breathing. Alexandra noticed the shift. What's wrong? Nathan held up the phone, hand trembling. The River House. Claire inherited it. Alexandra set her coffee down on the glass desk. That's not possible. She read the message twice, stood, and walked to the window, staring at the city without seeing it. We need to talk to my father. Now. Reginald Cole was signing documents when Alexandra walked in without knocking. Nathan followed and shut the door behind him. Dad, we have a problem. The River House just transferred to Claire Bennett's name. Reginald set down his pen and looked up slowly. The caretaker. The old woman left it to the caretaker. Alexandra nodded. Nathan cleared his throat. I can fix it. Claire's sentimental. If I tell her I made a mistake, that I want to come back, she'll. Reginald cut him off with a look. Yesterday you humiliated her in front of 20 people. And you think today she's going to believe you if you show up with flowers? Nathan's jaw tightened. She still loves me. I can get her back. Reginald leaned back in his leather chair. Then do it fast. That house is the centerpiece of the Riverside project. Without it, we lose $18 million in investment. And if you lose that house, Nathan, you're going to lose a lot more than a deal. Nathan left the office with his hands sweating. Alexandra caught up with him at the elevator. Do you actually think you can convince her? Nathan nodded, though his voice sounded hollow. I know Claire. I know how she works. Alexandra pressed the button for the ground floor. Let's hope you're right, because if you're not, we're going to have to take that house another way. And it won't be gentle. That afternoon, Patricia Bennett was in her boutique, talking on the phone in a low, venomous voice. I always suspected Claire, too quiet, too humble. Now I understand why. She was just waiting for some rich old woman to die so she could take everything. The news traveled fast. In the neighborhood where Dorothy lived, the neighbors whispered. In the homes where Claire worked, families started to have doubts. One woman called to cancel her services. Another left a message saying they'd rather find someone without legal trouble hanging over them. That night, someone knocked on the door of Dorothy's house. The old woman looked through the peephole and went pale. It's Nathan. Claire opened the door only a crack. Nathan stood under the yellow porch light with a bouquet of red roses in his hands and an expression that looked shattered. He was wearing the blue shirt she'd given him years ago. Claire whispered, her voice breaking. I think I made the worst mistake of my life. Claire didn't open the door. She stood behind it, blocking the entrance, staring at Nathan like he was a ghost. He held the flowers with both hands, his head down, shoulders slumped, everything about him screaming remorse. What do you want? Claire asked. Her voice came out harder than she expected. Nathan lifted his eyes. They were red, swollen, like he'd been crying. I need to talk to you. Please. Just 5 minutes. Dorothy appeared behind her daughter, leaning on the doorframe. Leave, Nathan. You've done enough. He ignored the old woman, keeping his eyes fixed on Claire. I know I hurt you. I know what I did last night was unforgivable. But I was confused, pressured by people I don't even care about, and I made the worst decision of my life. Claire felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous, hope tangled up with pain. Why did you do that, Nathan? Why in front of all those people? He closed his eyes. Because I'm a coward. I thought if I did it in public, I couldn't back out. I thought it would be easier. But the second I watched you walk out of that restaurant, I knew I'd destroyed the only real thing I had. Dorothy stepped forward. That's enough. Get out. But Nathan kept talking, and his voice sounded genuine, broken, real. Claire, let me in. Let me explain everything. Please. Claire hesitated. Dorothy looked at her with pleading eyes. No, sweetheart. No. But Claire had already opened the door. Nathan stepped inside slowly, as if afraid she might change her mind. He set the flowers on the side table and sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, head bowed. Claire stood with her arms crossed. Dorothy didn't move from the doorway. You have 5 minutes, Claire said. Nathan took a shaking breath. What happened last night is a mistake I'm going to regret for the rest of my life. I let pride get the better of me, ambition, people who convinced me I needed to become someone different. But I was wrong. Completely wrong. Then why did you do it? Claire asked. Nathan looked up, tears running down his face. Because I was afraid. Afraid of always being the same poor kid who grew up with nothing. Afraid of not being enough. And instead of talking to you about it, I let other people convince me you were the problem. But you're not, Claire. You never were. The problem was always me. Claire felt something inside her start to soften. Nathan's words sounded true, wounded, human. Dorothy pressed her lips together but said nothing. Nathan went on. I know you inherited Margaret's house, and I know they're already coming after you for it. Trevor Ashworth attacked you in public. People are talking, and it's going to get worse, Claire, because that house is worth a fortune. How do you know that? Claire asked. Nathan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Because I work in real estate. I know that market. That neighborhood is in the middle of major development. There are big investors, powerful people, who've spent months trying to buy up property there. And when they find out a humble caretaker inherited the most important piece of it, they're going to come for you. They're going to pressure you, threaten you, destroy your reputation until you have no choice but to sell. A chill ran through Claire. Who? Nathan shook his head. I can't give you names without proof. But I know how they operate, and you're not prepared to face this alone, Claire. You're a good woman, honest, hardworking. But they don't play fair. He stood slowly and took a step toward her. Let me help you. Let me protect you. We can call off the divorce. We can try again and I'll help you handle all of this. The lawyers, the pressure, the offers. You don't have to go through this alone. And for one moment, Claire almost believed him. Because Nathan sounded sincere, sounded sorry, sounded like the man he'd been 10 years ago, back when he still looked at her like she was something rare. But then he added something more. Besides, Claire, a property like that needs serious management. Taxes, upkeep, insurance. If you don't know how to handle it, you could lose it. I can help you with all of that. Claire studied him. When Nathan spoke about reconciliation, his voice trembled. But when he spoke about the house, about management, about taxes, his tone changed. It turned firm, professional, the voice he used for business. Do you know the people who want to buy that house? Claire asked slowly. Nathan blinked. What? No, I just know the market. I'm not involved. Do you know Reginald Cole? Claire interrupted. The man who sat at that table last night watching me get humiliated. Nathan tensed. That's different, Claire. Reginald is a business partner. And Alexandra? Is she just a business partner too? Nathan shut his mouth. His mask started to crack. Claire took a step toward him. You came here with flowers and pretty words, but you didn't come for me. You came for the house. Nathan shook his head, but he no longer sounded convincing. No, Claire, I came because I still... Claire raised a hand to silence him. It took you 12 years to leave me on the street, Nathan. But it only took you 10 minutes to come crawling back for something that was never yours. The silence that followed was so heavy that Dorothy felt it from the doorway. Nathan's fists clenched. Claire, you're making a mistake. That house is going to bring you more trouble than you can handle. They're going to destroy your reputation, your work, your life. And when that happens, you won't have anyone. You'll have no one left. Maybe you're right, Claire said. But I'd rather face it alone than accept help from the man who humiliated me to impress his mistress. Something in Nathan changed. The fake sadness vanished. His face hardened. You were always naive, Claire. That's why you never grew. That's why you're still stuck answering phones instead of doing something that actually matters. Dorothy stepped forward. Get out of my house. Now. Nathan looked at both of them with something close to hatred. Fine. But when you lose everything, when you're left with no job, no house, no dignity, don't come looking for me, because I won't be there. He slammed the door on his way out. Claire locked it and leaned against it, breathing hard. Dorothy wrapped her arms around her daughter. You did the right thing, sweetheart. You did the right thing. But later that night, while Claire tried to sleep, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Only 2 lines. Sell the house or everyone will know what you really did to that old woman. You have 1 week. Attached was a photograph. Claire, leaving a bank, 3 days before Margaret's death. Claire stared at the photo until the screen went dark on its own. Someone had followed her to that bank 3 days before Margaret died. Someone had taken that picture, waiting for exactly the right moment to use it as a weapon. And whoever it was, they had made one thing brutally clear. This fight had only just begun, and they were not going to stop until they took everything she had left. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat staring at the photo on her phone until the screen dimmed on its own. Someone had followed her to that bank. Someone had waited, watched, planned the exact moment to strike. She got up before sunrise, splashed cold water on her face, and called Daniel Ford. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Mrs. Bennett? Are you all right? Claire pressed the phone to her ear. I got a threat. A photo from the bank. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Don't respond to that message. Don't delete anything. Come to my office in 2 hours. There's something you need to see. Dorothy made coffee while Claire got dressed. The old woman's hands trembled as she poured. Sweetheart, maybe you should sell that house. Go somewhere far away. Start over where nobody knows you. Claire wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I'm not running. Margaret left me that house because she trusted me. I'm not going to betray that out of fear. 2 hours later, Daniel was waiting outside a black iron gate with the Ashworth family crest carved into the center. Claire had seen the River House hundreds of times from the outside, arriving for her shifts, but she had never walked through the front gate as its owner. Daniel unlocked it with an old key, and the gate creaked like it hadn't moved in years. The house was enormous, 2 stories of pale stone with tall windows and wrought iron balconies. The garden had gone wild, choked with dead leaves and fallen branches. The fountain in the center no longer ran, just dark moss creeping through the cracks. Claire walked slowly up the stone path, remembering the nights Margaret used to tell her how that same garden had once been filled with white roses, back when her husband was alive. Daniel opened the front door. Inside it smelled like old wood, dust, and silence. The floor was antique tile patterned with blue and yellow flowers. Furniture sat draped in white sheets like waiting ghosts. This is the main sitting room, Daniel said, pulling back one of the sheets. Underneath was a dark green velvet sofa, worn but still dignified. Margaret spent her afternoons here, reading. Claire ran her fingers along the back of the sofa. She could almost see the old woman sitting there, a book in her lap, a blanket over her knees. They climbed a wooden staircase that groaned under their feet. The second floor had 4 bedrooms. Daniel opened the door to the largest one. This was Margaret's room. Claire stepped inside, and the air tasted bitter. The bed was made with clean white sheets. On the nightstand sat a half-finished glass of water, a wooden rosary, and a framed photograph of a mustached man in a dark suit. Her husband died 20 years ago, Daniel said. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, remembering the long nights caring for Margaret when the pain wouldn't let her sleep, remembering how the old woman used to squeeze her hand and tell her not to be afraid, that God always looks after those who look after others. Why did she leave all this to me, Daniel? I'm not family. I'm nobody important. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. Because you treated her like she still mattered. And to a woman the world had forgotten, that's worth more than money. They went back downstairs. Daniel showed her the large kitchen with antique tile, the dining room with a table set for 12, the library full of books no one had touched in years. Every corner of the house held the memory of a family that no longer existed. This isn't just a property, Mrs. Bennet. It's history. It's memory. And that's exactly why some people want to see it destroyed. They stepped into the backyard. A stone bench sat beneath an old oak tree. Claire sank onto it, exhausted. Daniel stood, looking toward the street. This neighborhood is called Riverside Heights. Immigrant families settled here over 100 years ago. Now only a handful of the original houses remain. Most were bought up and demolished for new towers. Who bought them? Claire asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. Then a woman's voice interrupted from the other side of the fence. Claire, is that you? Claire stood up. An older woman stood at the fence in a flowered apron, her white hair pulled back in a bun. Mrs. Dolores, from next door. Margaret talked about her all the time. The woman smiled sadly. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry about Margaret. She was a good woman. Too good. She didn't deserve to die so alone. Claire walked closer to the fence. She wasn't alone, Mrs. Dolores. I was with her. The old woman nodded. I know, dear, and that's why she left you the house. Everyone in the neighborhood knows it. But we also know there are bad people trying to take it from you. What people? Claire asked. Dolores glanced around nervously, as if someone might be listening. I can't give you names, but I'll tell you something my husband taught me before he passed. Some people buy houses the way you'd pull teeth, slowly, painfully, and they tell you it's for your own good, that it's necessary, that it's for the best. But in the end, all they want is what was never theirs to take. The woman turned and walked back inside without another word. Daniel touched Claire's shoulder. It's getting late. You should go. But be careful, this house is being watched. Claire left through the gate, a heavy weight pressing on her chest. The river house wasn't just an inheritance. It was a problem someone was willing to solve with threats. She walked toward the corner where she'd left her borrowed car. Then she looked up and froze. Across the street, leaning against a gleaming white car, stood Alexandra Cole, dressed in pearl gray, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes, a small smile that never reached her lips. She was staring at the front of the river house like she already had the keys in her hand. When Alexandra saw Claire, she didn't move. She simply tilted her head slowly, the way someone greets a person they already consider defeated. Alexandra didn't call out her name. She didn't cross the street. She simply waited until Claire got into her car, and then got into her own. 5 minutes later, Claire's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I'd love to invite you for coffee. Just the two of us, no lawyers, no drama. There are things we should talk about, woman to woman. Claire gripped the steering wheel. Dorothy had taught her never to accept invitations from snakes. But she had also taught her that sometimes you need to look the enemy in the eye to understand exactly what they're planning. She typed back a single word. But 30 minutes later, Claire sat in a downtown cafe that looked like it had been lifted straight out of a European magazine. White marble floors, pink velvet chairs, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Each cup of coffee cost more than she made in 3 hours of work. Alexandra was already there, seated by the window in a beige dress, her smile perfectly composed. Thank you for coming, she said as Claire sat down. I know things between you and Nathan ended badly, but I want you to know I have nothing personal against you. Claire didn't respond. She scanned the menu, trying to find anything that wasn't absurdly overpriced. Alexandra ordered for both of them without asking. 2 cappuccinos, 2 almond croissants. When the waitress left, Alexandra leaned forward, folding her hands on the table. Claire, I know you inherited the river house, and I know that must feel overwhelming. A property that large, with so many expenses, in the middle of a legal dispute with the Ashworth family. It must be exhausting. Claire looked her straight in the eye. What are you getting at? Alexandra smiled. I like that you're direct. I'll be honest with you. My father and I are working on an urban renewal project in that area. We want to revive Riverside Heights, make it safer, more modern, more accessible for young people who want to live close to downtown. But to do it properly, we need certain key properties, and the River House is one of them. The waitress brought the coffees. Alexandra sipped hers calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. We're prepared to offer you $250,000 for the house. Cash, no conditions, no lawyers fighting, no investigations. You sign the papers and the money is yours. Claire felt the air grow heavy. $250,000 was more money than she had ever seen in her life. She could pay off all her mother's debts, get her better treatment, disappear somewhere far away and start over where no one knew her name. Alexandra read her face. I know it's a lot to process, but think about it, Claire. With that money, you could give your mother a decent life. You could forget this whole scandal. You could stop being the woman everyone points at on the street. Claire set her cup down without drinking from it. And what happens to the house? Alexandra shrugged. We tear it down. We build something new, something better, something people can actually use. Claire stared at her. Something you can sell for a fortune, you mean? Alexandra smiled, but this time it was cold. There's nothing wrong with doing business, Claire. That's how the world works. Some people build, others just look after what someone else left behind. You've always been the second kind. There's nothing shameful in that. But don't pretend you can play at our level. Claire felt the words land like a slap. She stood up. Alexandra raised a hand. Wait, sit down. I'm not finished. Claire hesitated but sat back down. Alexandra leaned in, lowering her voice. Nathan told me you were always stubborn, that you never knew when it was time to let go. That's why he had to leave you, because you didn't fit into the future he deserved. Some women are born to walk beside great men, Claire. Others are born to stay behind, taking care of the ones who don't matter anymore. And you've always been the kind who stays behind. Claire stood again. This time she didn't sit back down. She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Alexandra called after her from the table. You have 1 week to think it over, Claire. After that, the offer drops and things get difficult. Claire left the cafe with her legs shaking, got into her car, and slammed the door shut. She didn't cry, didn't scream, but she gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. That evening, when she got back to her mother's house, there were 2 voicemails on her phone. The first was from Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman she cared for 3 times a week. I'm so sorry, Claire, but my son says it's best to find someone without legal trouble. I hope you understand. The second was from the Coopers. Claire, we really appreciate your work, but we'd rather avoid any complicated situations. We wish you the best. In less than 24 hours, she had lost 2 jobs, and the week had barely begun. Claire spent the next 3 days calling her other clients, trying to salvage what was left of her reputation. Some answered with awkward excuses. Others simply didn't pick up. One woman told her, with real regret in her voice, that her family had read on social media that Claire was under investigation for manipulating a sick old woman, and they couldn't take the risk. By Friday morning, Claire had only 1 client left, Walter Hines, an 82-year-old man who lived alone near the market. When she arrived for her shift, he greeted her with a toothless smile. I don't care what they're saying, sweetheart. I know you're good people. Claire had to turn away so he wouldn't see her wipe her eyes. That afternoon she went to the pharmacy where Margaret used to fill her prescriptions. The pharmacist was a woman in her 50s named Rosa, with a rough voice and ink-stained hands. When she saw Claire walk in, her expression shifted. Oh, honey, what a mess you've gotten yourself into. Claire leaned on the counter. Rosa, I need to ask you something. You knew Margaret well. Did she ever mention people trying to buy her house? Rosa glanced toward the door as though someone might be listening and lowered her voice. Look, Claire, I don't want trouble. I have a family, this shop. I can't get mixed up in anything big. Claire pressed her hands on the counter. Please, Rosa. Just tell me if she was scared. The woman sighed. Yes, she was scared. The last few months she'd come in almost every week, and she always told me there were men in nice suits knocking on her door, leaving cards, talking sweet but with a threat underneath. They told her the house was dangerous for a woman alone, that it could collapse, that she should sell before something bad happened. Did she give you any names? Rosa shook her head. Never. But once she showed me a business card. It was from a real estate company. I don't remember the whole name, but it had the word coal in it. Everything started falling into place for Claire. Do you know if anyone else in the neighborhood got the same treatment? Rosa nodded slowly. Mr. Delgado, who lived 3 houses down, sold 6 months ago. Mrs. Carla on the corner, for months ago. Mr. Reyes held out a year, but eventually he sold too. All of them were old, all lived alone, and all of them sold for far less than what their homes were worth. Claire left the pharmacy with her stomach in knots. She walked over to Mr. Delgado's old house, but when she arrived, all she found was an empty lot behind a chain-link fence. In its place stood a large sign, "Coming soon, Riverside Arches, a project by Cole Urban Holdings." She kept walking to Mrs. Carla's old house. Same story. Empty lot. Same sign. Claire pulled out her phone and photographed everything. She didn't know yet what she'd do with the pictures, but something told her she'd need them. That night, over dinner with her mother, the local news ran a short segment. Trevor Ashworth appeared on screen, dressed in black, eyes red, voice cracking. My aunt was a noble woman who was deceived in the final days of her life by someone who won her trust only to steal everything from her. I will not allow my family's memory to be tarnished by an opportunist. The reporter asked if he had proof. Trevor nodded. We're gathering testimonies from people who witnessed suspicious behavior, and soon we'll be filing a formal lawsuit to overturn that fraudulent will. Dorothy turned off the television with trembling hands. Sweetheart, this is getting very ugly. Claire didn't answer. She just stared at the dark screen. Then Dorothy started breathing too fast. Her hand flew to her chest. Claire rushed to her side. Mom, what's wrong? Dorothy tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She could only gasp between breaths over and over. My daughter is not a thief. My daughter is not a thief. My daughter is not a thief. Claire helped her mother lie down on the couch and called for an ambulance. The doctor at the clinic said Dorothy had suffered a severe anxiety attack. He prescribed her medication and told her she needed to avoid stress. Claire almost laughed. How do you avoid stress when your entire world is collapsing around you? She brought her mother home in a taxi. Dorothy stayed quiet the whole ride, staring out the window. When they got inside, Claire helped her into bed and made her chamomile tea. Forgive me, Ma. All of this is my fault. Dorothy gripped her daughter's hand tightly. Don't say that. You didn't do anything wrong. The bad people are the ones doing this. Claire sat on the edge of the bed. Maybe I should sell the house. Take the money they offered. Get us far away from here. Dorothy closed her eyes. If that's what you decide, sweetheart, I'll support you. But don't do it out of fear. Do it because you want to, not because they forced you. Someone knocked on the door. Claire checked the clock. 9 at night. She looked through the peephole. Patricia Bennett stood outside in a black coat, her hair perfectly styled. Claire opened the door only a crack. What do you want? Patricia pushed the door open gently and walked in without permission. I came to talk to you, woman to woman. Claire shut the door hard. We have nothing to talk about. Patricia took off her coat and draped it over the back of the couch as if she owned the place. Of course we do, because what you're doing isn't just destroying you, it's destroying your mother too. Claire's fists clenched. You have no right to talk about my mother. Patricia sat down, crossing her legs. I have every right because, unlike you, I know what it means to protect my family. And a decent woman, Claire, a woman with dignity, would turn down an inheritance that was never hers to begin with. That house belonged to the Ashworth family, not to you. You were just the hired help, and now you're clinging to something that isn't yours out of pure pride or greed. I'm not sure which is worse. Claire took a step toward her. Get out of my house. Patricia didn't move. Nathan told me they offered you money. A lot of money. Why don't you take it and disappear? Then your mother can live in peace. You can start over. Everyone wins. Dorothy appeared in the bedroom doorway, holding onto the frame for support, her face pale but her eyes burning. Patricia Bennett, I'm going to ask you once to leave my house. Patricia looked at her, surprised. Dorothy, stay out of this. I'm trying to help your daughter. The old woman took a step forward, trembling but firm. No, you're not helping. You're trying to humiliate her, the way you always have, the way your son always has. My daughter might be poor, Patricia. She might be simple. She might not have your expensive clothes or your queen airs. But my daughter has never been dirty. She has never stolen. She has never lied. And if an old woman who knew her decided to leave her house, it's because she saw in Claire exactly what I see every single day. An honest woman, a woman worth 1,000 times more than your son. The silence that followed was so heavy that even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Patricia stood slowly, her face flushing red with rage. You're both going to regret this because when Trevor wins that lawsuit, when they take that house away, Claire is going to have nothing left. No house, no job, no dignity. Claire opened the door. Out. Patricia grabbed her coat and stormed out. Before she left, she turned once more. Nathan was right. You were always a dead weight, and now you're going to drag your mother down with you. Claire locked the door and leaned against it. Dorothy walked slowly toward her and wrapped her arms around her daughter. They stood together in the middle of the living room, holding each other up. Forgive me, sweetheart, Dorothy whispered. Forgive me for all the times I told you to just endure it, to stay quiet, not to make a scene. I should have taught you to fight from the very beginning. Claire held her mother tighter. No. You taught me to be good, and that's the only thing keeping me standing right now. The next morning, Daniel Ford called early. Claire, I need you to come to my office right now. Something serious happened. She dressed quickly and left without eating. When she arrived, Daniel's face was more serious than she'd ever seen it. Trevor Ashworth filed a formal lawsuit to overturn the will, and he's found a witness. Who? Daniel pressed his lips together. Nathan Bennett. Your husband is going to testify that during Margaret's final months, you were emotionally unstable, that you talked about money constantly, that you were desperate to escape poverty, and that you used your position as her caretaker to manipulate a sick old woman. Claire felt the floor disappear beneath her. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't give up, Claire. We still have cards to play. But you have to trust me, and you have to be ready to fight. Claire lifted her eyes. They were no longer filled with fear. They were filled with rage. Tell me what I need to do. Daniel folded his hands on the desk. His face didn't show anger, it showed something worse. Disappointment. Claire, Trevor filed the lawsuit 3 days ago. It's already on record. But the problem isn't Trevor. The problem is who's going to back him up. Claire didn't understand right away. Who? Daniel slid a document across the desk. Nathan Bennett. Your husband agreed to be Trevor's witness. He's going to testify that Margaret wasn't of sound mind, and that you manipulated her. Something inside Claire's chest split in two. No. That can't be true. Daniel turned to the second page. This is his preliminary statement. It says that during the last months, you talked constantly about money, that you were obsessed with escaping poverty, that you grew emotionally attached to the elderly people you cared for as if they were your own family, and that when Margaret died, you didn't show grief, you showed relief. Claire shook her head. That's a lie. All of it is a lie. Daniel closed the folder. I know. But a judge doesn't know me, and doesn't know you. A judge is going to see a well-dressed man with a steady job, testifying under oath against his own wife. That carries weight, Claire. A lot of weight. She stood up. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to make him tell the truth. Daniel raised a hand. No. That's exactly what they're hoping for. They want you to lose control. They want you to seek him out, confront him, scream, cry, because everything you do from this point forward is going to be used against you. Claire stared at him, lost. Then what do I do? Daniel took a breath. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Don't talk to Nathan. Don't talk to Trevor. Don't give interviews. Don't answer messages. Because if you cry, they'll say you're faking it. If you stay silent, they'll say you have no defense. And if you get angry, they'll say you're unstable. They've already built the trap, Claire. All they're waiting for now is for you to fall into it. She left his office feeling like the air itself had gotten heavier. She walked the downtown streets without any direction, watching people talk and laugh and live their ordinary lives, none of them knowing that the woman who just passed them was being destroyed piece by piece. Meanwhile, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Nathan Bennett sat across from Reginald Cole. "Did she sign?" Reginald asked without looking up from his papers. Nathan nodded. "Yesterday. Trevor has everything he needs." Reginald set down his pen. "And you think Claire's going to fold when she sees your name on that statement?" Nathan shifted in his seat. "I know her. She's sentimental. This is going to break her." Alexandra, standing by the window with her arms crossed, turned around. "You'd better be right, because if she decides to fight and find something she shouldn't, we're all going to have problems, including you." Nathan clenched his jaw. "She's not going to find anything. Claire isn't smart that way. She's good, but she's not clever." Reginald finally looked up. "Good people can be very dangerous when you push them too far. And you're pushing her right to the edge of a cliff. I hope you know what you're doing." Nathan left the office with sweat on his palms. Alexandra walked him to the elevator. "Are you sure she won't turn on you?" He glared at her. "Of course not. I only visited Margaret once, to see if she was interested in selling. That's not illegal." Alexandra pressed the button for the lobby. "No, but it is inconvenient, especially if Claire starts putting the pieces together." When the elevator doors opened, Nathan walked out without saying goodbye. Alexandra stood watching him go, then pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Dad, I think Nathan is becoming a problem." Reginald's voice came back calm and even. "Then be ready to cut him loose if you have to. Men like him are always disposable." That afternoon, Claire arrived at the parking garage near Daniel's building. Her car sat in the back, beneath the shade of an old tree. She walked slowly, digging through her bag for her keys. Then a voice stopped her. "Claire." She looked up. Nathan was leaning against her car. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked calm, too calm. Claire felt her stomach twist. "What are you doing here?" Nathan straightened up. "I came to talk to you before this gets any worse." Claire tightened her grip on her keys. "You already signed against me. What else is there to talk about?" He took a step closer. "I signed because they asked me to. But I can still withdraw that statement. I can still help you." "In exchange for what?" Claire asked. Nathan slid his hands into his pockets. "You already know what. Sell the house, take the money, and all of this ends. Trevor drops the lawsuit. I withdraw my statement. And you get to go on with your life without anyone pointing fingers at you on the street." Claire studied him carefully. There was something in his voice now that hadn't been there before, something that told her the real battle was only just beginning. "Why does that house matter so much to you, Nathan?" Claire asked. He didn't answer right away. Claire took a step toward him. "It was you. You went to see Margaret before she died, didn't you?" Nathan shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about." Claire felt anger rising in her throat. "Yes, you do. That's why you're here. You're afraid I'm going to find out the truth." Nathan's calm cracked. His voice turned cold. "The problem with you, Claire, has always been the same. You confuse feelings with reality. You think that because someone was kind to you, they owe you something. You think taking care of an old woman means you deserve her fortune. But the world doesn't work that way. The world rewards smart people, not good people." Claire felt tears rising, but she swallowed them down. "And you're the smart one, Nathan. That's why you humiliated me in front of everyone. That's why you slept with that woman while I was working, caring for the sick." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, because I understood that staying with you meant dying slowly, and I wasn't born for that." Claire opened her car door. Nathan grabbed her arm. She yanked it free. "Don't touch me." He raised both hands. "Fine. But listen to me carefully. If you don't sell that house, you're going to lose everything, your job, your reputation, and your mother, because Dorothy is already sick. How much longer do you think she can watch her daughter get destroyed on the news?" Claire got into the car and slammed the door shut. Nathan pounded on the window. Don't be a fool. Think about your mother. Think about yourself. She started the engine and pulled out without looking back. In the rearview mirror, she watched him standing under the sun, his face red with fury. For the first time in 12 years, Claire Bennett hadn't done what Nathan expected, and that made him angrier than anything else ever could. Claire drove without knowing where she was going. She passed her mother's house without stopping. She passed the market where she used to buy vegetables. She passed the church where she'd gotten married. Everything looked strange, like the city no longer belonged to her. She ended up parked in front of the river house, staring at the pale stone facade. The windows were shut, the garden still overgrown, but something was different. The front door stood slightly open. Claire knew Daniel always kept it locked. She got out slowly. The street was silent. She walked to the gate and pushed it open. It creaked the way it always did. She climbed the stone steps and pushed the door in. Inside, the air smelled different. Not just dust and old wood, cologne. Expensive cologne. Men's cologne. Claire stepped in carefully, her heart pounding. The sitting room looked the same, furniture still draped in white sheets, the antique tile floor unchanged. But when she reached Margaret's writing desk, she knew someone had been there. The drawers were open. Papers that had been neatly stacked were now scattered across the desk. The bookshelf had books pulled out of place. Someone had searched the room fast, without care. Claire climbed the stairs. Margaret's bedroom had been disturbed too. The bed was still made, but the closet doors hung open. Shoeboxes that had held old photographs were tipped over on the floor. One was completely empty. Claire pulled out her phone and called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring. Mrs. Bennett, is something wrong? Someone broke into the house. They went through everything, searched for something. Daniel went quiet for a moment. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, Daniel arrived with a locksmith and an older man he introduced as a private investigator he trusted. They went through the whole house. The investigator photographed everything. The locksmith changed the locks. Nothing valuable was taken, the investigator said. No jewelry, no cash, no electronics. Whoever came was only after papers. What papers? Claire asked. The investigator shrugged. Only the person who broke in knows that. Daniel walked over to Claire. You need to leave. This isn't safe. She shook her head. I'm not going to let them scare me out of this house. Daniel's jaw tightened. Claire, this isn't just a legal fight anymore. Someone is desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. Before she could answer, a woman's voice called from the front door. Claire. An older woman in her 60s stood in the doorway, wearing a flowered apron, her white hair tucked under a scarf. It was Marta, who had cleaned Margaret's house for 15 years. I heard there was a break-in. I came to check on you. Claire hugged her. I'm fine, Marta. Thank you. The woman looked around sadly. Oh, Margaret. Not even in death do they leave her in peace. Daniel stepped closer. Mrs. Marta, do you remember if anyone visited Margaret in the last few weeks? Anyone besides Claire? Marta nodded. Yes. A well-dressed man in a dark suit, expensive cologne. Do you remember his name? Daniel asked. Marta shook her head. She never told me. But I remember that after he left, Margaret was very upset. Claire felt her stomach tighten. What did she say? Marta looked down. She told me some people smile like buyers but walk in like thieves. And that she'd recognized something in that man, something she wasn't expecting to recognize. Was he young? Old? Claire's voice trembled. Marta thought for a moment. Young. Maybe your age. Very handsome, the kind who knows how to talk sweet. Claire closed her eyes. Nathan. Marta looked at her with pity. I don't know if it was him, sweetheart. But I know that after that visit, Margaret started hiding papers in strange places, like she was afraid someone was going to take them from her. Daniel wrote everything down. Marta hugged Claire tightly before leaving. When everyone was gone, Claire sat alone in the house, on the green velvet sofa, staring up at the high ceiling. The silence was so complete she could hear her own breathing. Then her phone buzzed. An email. Sender, Cole Urban Holdings. Subject, final purchase offer. Claire opened the message. It was a formal proposal for $300,000. Deadline, 24 hours. If she didn't respond, the offer would be withdrawn. And at the bottom, in small print, one final line. After this deadline, we cannot guarantee the security of the property or the reputation of its owner. Claire closed her phone, walked out of the house, locked the door, and got into her car. She drove to her mother's house. When she walked in, Dorothy was lying on the couch with a cold compress on her forehead. "Mom." The old woman opened her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, everything hurts." Claire knelt beside her. "Did you take your medicine?" Dorothy nodded. "It doesn't do any good if the pain comes from watching my daughter suffer." Claire rested her head on her mother's lap. "Maybe I should sell the house, Mom. Maybe it's for the best." Dorothy stroked her daughter's hair. "If that's what you decide, I'll support you. But don't do it out of fear, Claire. Do it because you want to." That night, Claire didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee between her hands. She thought about Margaret. She thought about Marta. She thought about all the demolished houses in the neighborhood. She thought about the old people who signed papers they didn't understand, and about Nathan, smiling like a buyer while walking in like a thief. At 6 in the morning, she called Daniel. He answered sounding like he hadn't slept either. "Mrs. Bennet." Claire took a breath. "I need you to take me to meet someone." Daniel was quiet. "Who?" "Someone who went through exactly what Margaret went through. Someone who'll tell me the truth." Daniel picked her up at 9. They barely spoke on the drive. He drove slowly as if giving Claire time to change her mind, but she just stared out the window and said nothing. They arrived at a neighborhood much like her mother's. Small houses with tidy gardens and iron fences. Daniel parked in front of a blue house with pots of geraniums by the door. "This is Walter Reyes's house," Daniel said. "He had a house in Riverside Heights. Sold 8 months ago." Claire got out of the car. Daniel knocked. A man in his 70s opened the door, thin, white-haired, tired eyes, wearing a plaid shirt and worn jeans. "Good morning, Mr. Reyes. This is Claire Bennet. I called earlier." The man nodded and let them inside. The house smelled of fresh coffee and sweet bread. A younger woman, maybe his daughter, sat in the living room. She didn't smile when she saw them. "This is my daughter, Louisa," Walter said. "She's lived with me since I sold the other house." Louisa nodded but said nothing. "Please, sit down," Walter said, gesturing to the couch. Claire sat slowly. He brought coffee in chipped mugs and sat across from them. "Daniel told me you inherited Margaret's house." Claire nodded. Walter sighed. "Margaret was a good woman. Very proud but good. That's why she held out as long as she did." "Held out against what?" Claire asked. Walter looked at his daughter. Louisa spoke instead. "The same thing my father held out against. Well-dressed people knocking on the door, telling him the house was too big for a man alone, that the neighborhood was changing, that it was dangerous, that he should sell before something bad happened." "Who was telling him that?" Claire asked. Louisa pressed her lips together. "At first it was different people. A man in a gray suit, then a young, pretty woman, then another man, younger, who spoke perfect Spanish and smiled a lot. They all said the same thing, that they wanted to help." Claire felt her stomach drop. "The young man, was he handsome? Maybe in his 30s? Louisa nodded. "Yes, very handsome, very kind. He'd bring my father bread. Ask how he was doing. But it always ended with him talking about the house." Walter interrupted. "I didn't want to sell. My father bought that house when he came from Mexico. My children were born there. My wife died there. But strange things started happening." "What kind of things?" Daniel asked. "A pipe burst. Then part of the roof caved in. Then someone dumped trash in my yard every night for 2 weeks. And one day a letter came from the city saying my house had code violations and I had 30 days to fix it or pay a fine." Louisa wiped her eyes. "Fixing all of that would have cost more than we had." And right then, the handsome man came back. He told my father he could help, that he knew people who could buy the house fast, in cash, no lawyers. Walter lowered his head. "They offered me $60,000. The house was worth at least $200,000. But I was tired, scared. I signed. Claire felt tears burning her eyes. And what happened to the house? Louisa pulled out her phone and showed her a photo. A new 5-story building, glass and concrete, luxury apartments. They tore it down 3 months later. Now this is what's there. Claire stared at the photo, feeling something break inside her. Walter stood slowly. If you came here to ask whether you should sell, I'll tell you the truth. Don't. Because if you sell, everything that house means will be erased, and they'll do the same thing to someone else, and then someone else, until there's nothing left of us in this city. Claire and Daniel left in silence. When they reached the car, she turned to him. How many more houses? Daniel gripped the steering wheel. As far as I know, 7. All in the same neighborhood. All belonging to elderly people. All bought for less than half their value. All demolished within 6 months. Claire stared out the window. And nobody did anything. Daniel shook his head. They're humble people, Claire. People who don't know lawyers, who don't know how to fight big companies, who just want to live in peace. And when someone in a suit with a nice smile tells them to sign, they trust it, because that's what they were taught to do. That afternoon, Claire got a message. It was from her mother. Sweetheart, come quickly. I don't feel well again. Claire rushed home. Dorothy sat pale on the couch, breathing hard. It's nothing, sweetheart. I just felt a little dizzy. Claire helped her lie down. I'm calling the doctor. Dorothy grabbed her hand. No, it'll pass. Just stay with me. Claire sat on the edge of the couch and stroked her mother's hair. I'm sorry, Mom. This is all my fault. Dorothy shook her head. Don't say that. You didn't do anything wrong. That night, while Dorothy slept, Claire opened her email. There it was, Alexandra's proposal. $300,000. 24-hour deadline. Claire looked at her sleeping mother, thought about Walter, thought about Margaret, thought about every demolished house, and thought about how easy it would be to sign and disappear. She closed the email without responding. Then she called Daniel. He answered right away. Mrs. Bennett. Claire took a breath. I'm not selling. Daniel went quiet. Are you sure? She looked at her mother. No. But I'm doing it anyway. Claire woke the next morning with a dull ache in her chest. She hadn't really slept, only closed her eyes for a few hours, hoping the fear would fade. It didn't. Dorothy was still weak. Her face had lost its color, and her hands trembled around her teacup. Sweetheart, maybe you should take that money, go far away, start over? Claire didn't answer. She kissed her mother's forehead and left. She drove to Daniel's office with Alexandra's printed offer crumpled in her hand. When she walked in, he was on the phone. He saw her and hung up immediately. Are you here to sign? Claire dropped the paper on his desk. I'm here for you to tell me why I shouldn't. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Because if you signed, they win. And not just against you, they win against everyone who already lost. Against Margaret. Against Walter. Against every old man and woman who signed out of fear and died in shame. Claire sat down slowly. But my mother is sick. I don't have a job. Everyone hates me. Daniel leaned forward. They hate you because someone told them to. But the truth always weighs more than the lie. You just need to hold on a little longer. Claire shook her head. I don't know if I can. Daniel stood. Come with me. I want to show you something. They left the office and got into his car. He drove without saying where they were going. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a small house in a quiet, run-down neighborhood. He knocked. A woman in her 40s opened the door, her face tired, her eyes red. Good morning, Claudia. She can explain this better than I can. They stepped inside a modest living room. An older man sat in a wheelchair by the window. This is my father, Claudia said. Mr. Earl. He had a house in Riverside Heights. Sold a year ago. Claire sat on the couch. Claudia sat across from her. My father is diabetic. 2 years ago he lost a foot. I work all day and couldn't take care of him properly. That's when the visit started. From who? Claire asked. People who told him the house was too much for him, that he needed to sell to pay for his medicine, that he'd lose everything anyway if he didn't. My father doesn't understand paperwork well. He has memory problems. but he signed because they told him it was for the best. How much did they pay him? Claire asked. Claudia looked down. 50,000. The house was worth over 200,000. But that's not the worst part. Claire felt a knot forming in her throat. What's the worst part? Claudia wiped her eyes. My father doesn't remember signing. Every time I ask, he says someone came, gave him papers, told him he was just fixing the house, not selling it. And now, when we drive past Riverside Heights and he sees the empty lot, he asks me where his house went, and I have to tell him it doesn't exist anymore. Claire looked at the old man in the wheelchair. He stared out the window, seeing nothing. Claudia continued. I don't know if I can prove he was deceived. I don't have lawyers, I don't have money. But I know my father didn't understand what he signed, and I know the people who took advantage of him are still doing the same thing to others. Daniel touched Claire's shoulder. That's why I brought you here. This isn't just your fight, Claire. It's theirs too. Claire stood slowly. Claudia, did your father sign alone, or was someone with him? The woman thought for a moment. There was a young man, very kind. He brought my father Chinese food because my father said he liked it. Then, after they ate, he pulled out the papers. Claire felt rage rising in her throat. Do you remember his name? Claudia shook her head. No, but I have his business card. Wait. She went to the kitchen and came back with a small card. Claire read it. Nathan Bennett. Real estate consultant. Cole Urban Holdings. The world stopped. Daniel took the card and slipped it into his folder. Claire couldn't breathe. Claudia looked at her, concerned. Are you all right? Claire nodded without being able to speak. Daniel took her arm. We need to go. In the car, Claire stared out the window, seeing nothing. Daniel drove in silence. Finally she spoke, her voice low. Nathan didn't just betray me. He betrayed all of them. Daniel nodded. And if you sell the house, he wins. Alexandra wins. Reginald wins. And everyone who already lost their homes loses twice. Claire closed her eyes. But if I don't sell my mother? Daniel cut her off. Your mother is going to be proud of you, because you're going to do the right thing even when it hurts. That afternoon, Claire walked into Daniel's office with her face set. I'm not selling. Daniel smiled for the first time in days. Then it's time to prepare, because they're not going to give up and neither are we. Claire left the building with her head held high. She passed a store window and caught her own reflection. She no longer looked like the broken woman who had walked out of that restaurant crying. She looked like someone who had decided to fight. That night, Alexandra called Nathan. She signed. Nathan tightened his grip on the phone. No. Alexandra was silent for a moment. Then we moved to Plan B. Nathan felt a chill run through him. What's Plan B? Alexandra hung up without answering. The next day, Daniel called Claire. Claire, Reginald Cole is holding a public event, an official announcement for the Riverside Arches project. It'll be at the Ashgrove Hotel. Press, investors, city officials. He wants you there. Claire frowned. Why? Daniel took a breath. Because he wants you to sign the sale in front of everyone, like it's a friendly agreement. Claire felt anger fill her chest. And if I don't go? Then they'll say you're hiding, that you're afraid, that you know you have no defense. Claire tightened her grip on the phone. And if I go? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then we have one chance, just one, to turn everything around. Claire closed her eyes. Tell me what I need to do. Daniel took a breath. You need to let them believe you're defeated. Let them believe you're going to sign, that you've given up. And when they're all certain they've won, we show them the truth. Claire opened her eyes. What truth? Daniel smiled faintly. The one Margaret left for you. The one we've been protecting this whole time. Claire felt something shift inside her. It wasn't fear anymore. It was strength. All right, I'll go. But I'm not signing anything. Daniel was quiet for a moment longer. Then get ready, Claire, because this is going to hurt before it heals. She hung up and looked out the window. The city kept glowing outside, indifferent, beautiful, cruel. But Claire Bennett was no longer the same woman who had walked into that city crying weeks ago. Now she was someone who understood that justice doesn't arrive on its own. You have to build it, piece by piece, tear by tear, truth by truth. And she was ready to begin. In the days that followed, Claire stopped answering messages. She stopped defending herself in the neighborhood gossip. When someone looked at her with contempt at the market, she lowered her head and kept walking. When Patricia called Dorothy to say her daughter was destroying the whole family, Claire didn't raise her voice. She just pressed her lips together and let the storm pass. To everyone watching, she looked like a defeated woman, exhausted, broken. Exactly what Nathan, Alexandra, and Reginald wanted to see. Nathan told Alexandra that Claire had stopped returning his calls with anger. Now she only said she was thinking, that she needed time, that maybe he was right about everything. Alexandra smiled over her coffee in her father's office. It was about time she understood her place. Reginald signed documents without looking up. Women like her always fold eventually. You just have to press the right point. Trevor Ashworth received a message from an unknown number. If you stick to your story through the event, you'll receive $50,000 in cash. The money is yours the day Claire signs. Trevor saved the message and smiled. Finally, something good was going to come out of his aunt's death. Patricia visited Dorothy one afternoon, unannounced, with a box of pastries like they were old friends. She sat in the living room with her legs crossed, speaking in a soft voice. "Dorothy, I know things between our families are difficult, but I want you to know, if Claire accepts the offer, Nathan will make sure you're taken care of. Medicine, treatment, anything you need." Dorothy didn't touch the pastries. She just looked at Patricia with tired eyes. "My daughter isn't for sale. And neither am I." Patricia left without saying goodbye. But what none of them knew was that behind Claire's silence, something was already moving. Daniel worked late every night gathering documents, dates, names. Claire visited humble homes in forgotten neighborhoods, listening to families who had lost their properties, hearing stories that sounded far too similar. A young, elegant, kind man who brought food, asked about their health, and then pulled out papers. Always the same papers. One afternoon, Claire met Sofia Nunez, an 84-year-old woman living with her granddaughter in a cramped, poorly ventilated apartment. The woman cried as she described how her late brother had signed away his house believing he was only approving a repair permit. By the time he realized what he'd done, it was too late. He died months later, never understanding why his house no longer existed. The granddaughter, a woman in her 30s with hollow, exhausted eyes, showed Claire a photograph. Her grandfather with the man who had convinced him, Nathan, smiling, his hand on the old man's shoulder as if they were family. Claire gripped the photo between her fingers. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. "Would you be willing to come to the hotel event and tell people what happened?" The granddaughter looked at her grandmother. Sophia trembled. "I'm afraid. Reginald Cole is powerful." Daniel knelt in front of her. "That's exactly why we need you to speak, Mrs. Nunez, because fear only works when we're alone. And you're not alone anymore." The old woman closed her eyes, then lifted her head slowly and nodded. "I'll go. For my brother, and for everyone who can't speak anymore." That night, Claire went home and sat beside her mother. Dorothy stroked her daughter's hair the way she had when Claire was small. "It's going to be all right, sweetheart." Claire didn't lie. "I don't know, Mom. But I'm going to try." 2 days before the event, Nathan called Claire. She let it ring 3 times before answering. "Claire, I need to confirm you're coming to the hotel. Reginald wants to close this cleanly. No lawyers fighting, no press making up lies, just you, me, and a fair agreement." Claire took a slow breath. "I'll be there." Nathan smiled on the other end of the line. "I knew you'd understand. You were always a reasonable woman when you didn't let pride get in the way." Claire hung up without another word. Daniel sat across from her with a small recorder on the table between them. "Ready to hear the last message?" Claire nodded. Daniel pressed play. Margaret's voice filled the room, weak, trembling, but perfectly clear. "If you're hearing this, Claire, it's because I'm already gone, and it's because I trust you. I know they're going to say I was out of my mind, that I didn't know what I was doing. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew from the very first day that man walked into my house in his expensive suit and his fake smile. He told me he was doing me a favor, that a woman alone shouldn't live in such a big house. But I recognized something in him. I recognized the husband of the only person who ever treated me with kindness. And when I asked if he knew Claire Bennett, his face changed. That's when I understood my caretaker was married to a thief. The recording continued. Margaret described how she'd started investigating on her own, how she'd spoken with neighbors who had sold their homes, how they all mentioned the same young man, how they'd all signed believing one thing and discovered another, and how Margaret decided she would not be another victim. She would be the trap. Claire closed her eyes. Daniel switched off the recorder. This changes everything. Claire stood. Then let's use it. The morning of the event, Claire dressed in a simple navy dress, no jewelry, light makeup, just her clean face and her hair loose around her shoulders. Dorothy insisted on coming, even though walking tired her quickly. I want to see you standing, sweetheart. Not hiding. Claire helped her mother into Daniel's car. All three of them knew that tonight, everything would change, for better or for worse. Meanwhile, at the Ashgrove Hotel, Alexandra was overseeing every detail: the lighting, the flowers, the giant screens displaying images of the future, glass buildings, modern terraces, young, beautiful people walking where old houses used to stand. The river house appeared in the projections too, but it wasn't Margaret's house anymore. It was a drawing on a screen, cold, perfect, dead. Reginald rehearsed his speech in front of the mirror in his office. Today we celebrate the future. A future where the old makes way for the new, where progress doesn't wait, where difficult decisions are made with courage. Alexandra walked in without knocking. Claire confirmed she's coming. Nathan says she's ready to sign. Reginald smiled. Then get ready to celebrate. Patricia arrived at the hotel 2 hours early, dressed in black with gold accents, her makeup flawless, a smile of triumph she couldn't hide. She greeted the guests like she owned the event. Trevor was already there too, in a new suit and shoes that shined too much. His palms were sweating, but he forced himself to look confident. Nathan waited in the lobby when Claire arrived. He watched her come in with Dorothy and Daniel, walking slowly, eyes down, like someone who had already accepted defeat. Nathan opened his arms as she approached. Claire, thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy for you. She didn't answer, just nodded. Nathan took that as a victory. The ballroom was packed. Investors, journalists, city officials, wealthy people with champagne glasses in their hands and empty conversations on their lips. Claire sat in a chair in the back with her mother. Daniel stood beside them. No one offered them a drink. No one spoke to them. They were the invisible guests. Then the lights dimmed. Reginald walked onto the stage. The microphone carried his deep, confident voice across the room. Good evening. Tonight marks the beginning of something great, something that will transform our city, and I want to thank everyone who made this dream possible. He spoke of progress, of modernity, of opportunity. He spoke of necessary sacrifices and courageous decisions. And then, with a perfect smile, he said something that made the entire room turn. Tonight we'd also like to resolve, amicably and respectfully, a situation that has caused some misunderstandings. Mrs. Claire Bennett has decided, with maturity and vision, to transfer ownership of the river house to our company, and I want everyone here to witness this act of good faith. Nathan walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and searched the room for Claire. Claire, could you join me please? Everyone expected to see her walk up with her head down, defeated. But when Claire stood, something in her face was different. She didn't look broken. She looked ready. And that was exactly when everything exploded. Claire walked toward the stage slowly. The entire room watched her. Alexandra stood near the head table with a glass in her hand, wearing a smile that tried too hard to look sympathetic. Patricia watched from her seat, eyes bright with satisfaction. Trevor bit his lip, nervous but hopeful. Nathan extended his hand to help her up the steps. She didn't take it. She climbed alone. Reginald offered her the microphone. Mrs. Bennett, thank you for being here. I know this process has been difficult for you, but I'm confident that tonight we can close this chapter with respect and dignity for everyone. Claire took the microphone. Her hand didn't shake. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Cole. There are a lot of things that need to be said tonight, and you're right, Everyone deserves to know the truth. Nathan's brow furrowed. Alexandra set her glass down on the table. Reginald kept his smile, but his eyes hardened. Claire turned toward the crowd. A few weeks ago, I was humiliated in a restaurant. I was handed divorce papers as an anniversary gift. And that same night, an elderly woman I had cared for with my whole heart passed away and left me her house. Many people said I manipulated her, that I took advantage of her, that I didn't deserve that inheritance. The room went silent. And maybe they were right, Claire continued. Maybe I don't deserve a house that big, that full of history, that full of memories that aren't mine. But Margaret Ashworth didn't leave it to me because I was special. She left it to me because she was afraid. Afraid of exactly what happened to her neighbors, her friends, so many elderly people in that neighborhood who sold their homes and never truly understood what they were signing. Reginald tried to interrupt. Mrs. Bennet, I don't think this is the place. Claire raised her voice. This is exactly the place because you organized this event so I would sign in front of everyone, so it would look like a fair agreement, so no one would ask what really happened. Daniel walked onto the stage with a folder in his hands. Claire stepped aside. He opened it and pulled out documents. The giant screens behind them began displaying names and figures. Walter Reyes sold his house for $60,000. Real value, $220,000. Carla Mendez sold for $55,000. Real value, $190,000. Earl Foster. Refugio Delgado. Olivia Ruiz. All of them sold. All for less than half their value. All over 70 years old. All living alone. And all visited by the same man. The screen changed. A photograph appeared. Nathan Bennett, smiling beside Earl Foster. Nathan at Carla's door. Nathan on Walter's front porch. The entire room turned to look at him. Nathan went pale. That doesn't mean anything. I work in real estate. Visiting properties is my job. Daniel pulled out another document. Here's your business card. Nathan Bennett, real estate consultant, Cole Urban Holdings. You worked directly for Reginald Cole, and your job wasn't just visiting properties. It was convincing vulnerable elderly people to sell their homes for a fraction of what they were worth. Alexandra tried to stand, but Reginald raised a hand to stop her. Nathan lifted his palms. I only offered them options. Nobody was forced to sell. Daniel stared him down. Options. Like telling Walter his house was going to collapse if he didn't sell fast. Like telling Carla the neighborhood was dangerous and a woman alone shouldn't live there. Like bringing Earl Chinese food and pulling out the papers while he was still eating. A woman stood up in the crowd. It was Claudia, Earl's daughter. My father has diabetes. He has memory problems. You told him he was only signing to fix his house, not to sell it. And when he realized what had happened, it was already too late. Her voice broke. My father asks every week where his house went, and I have to tell him it doesn't exist anymore, that they tore it down, that now it's a building full of people who will never know a good man lived there, a man who raised 5 children alone and worked 30 years at a factory. Another woman rose. Sofia Nunez, supported by her granddaughter. My brother died never understanding what they did to him. He signed because he trusted, because he was taught to trust people who smile and speak sweetly. She pointed a shaking finger at Nathan. That man used that trust to steal his life. The murmur in the room grew louder. Journalists pulled out cameras. Investors exchanged uneasy glances. Nathan tried to speak, but his voice came out weak. This is a lie, a revenge scheme because I divorced her. Daniel pulled out another sheet. Then explain this. Bank transfers. Commissions paid for every house sold. $40,000 for Walter's house. Similar amounts for Carla's, Earl's, all of them paid by companies linked to Cole Urban Holdings. Reginald stood. This is defamation. I'll sue everyone in this room. Claire took the microphone again. You can sue us. But you can't sue a dead woman. And Margaret left something behind that none of you expected. Daniel connected a small recorder to the hotel's sound system. Margaret's voice, elderly, tired, but perfectly lucid, filled the ballroom. If you're hearing this, it's because I'm already gone. I want to make it clear that Claire Bennett never manipulated me, never asked me for anything. She only cared for me when everyone else had abandoned me. I leave her my house because I trust she will do what I could no longer say myself, the truth." The recording continued. Margaret described Nathan's 3 visits, how he'd told her selling was the smart thing to do, how he'd tried to convince her that Claire only cared for her out of self-interest, and how, on the 3rd visit, Margaret had asked him directly if he knew Claire Bennett. His face changed. "That's when I understood my caretaker was married to a thief." The room erupted, raised voices, camera flashes, people standing from their seats. Alexandra tried to slip out through a side door, but reporters surrounded her. Reginald shouted that it was all a setup. Trevor tried to sneak away, but Daniel pointed him out. And him, Trevor Ashworth, the nephew who never once visited his aunt, accepted $50,000 to testify against Claire and pretend he cared about his family's memory. Trevor shook his head. "That's a lie." Daniel held up a text message. "Scheduled transfer. Date, today. Amount, $50,000. Sender, Cole Holdings corporate account." Trevor stopped denying it. Patricia sat frozen in her chair, watching her son fall apart in front of everyone. She tried to stand to defend him, but her legs wouldn't move. Nathan searched the room for Alexandra. She ignored him. He looked for Reginald. The man was already on the phone with his lawyers, preparing to save himself. Claire walked down until she stood in front of Nathan. The microphone carried every word. "You asked me for a divorce on our anniversary because you thought you were leaving me with nothing. But that day, Nathan, the one who lost everything was you. I lost a husband. You lost your soul." Nathan tried to respond, but no words came. He just stood there, surrounded by lights and eyes that judged him. Claire stepped off the stage, took her mother's hand, and walked out of the ballroom together while chaos erupted behind them. Outside, the cold night air met them like an embrace. Dorothy squeezed her daughter's hand. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." Claire said nothing. She cried. But this time it wasn't pain. It was release. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Local newspapers ran the full story. Company accused of defrauding elderly homeowners of historic properties. Real estate consultant used marriage to get close to victims. Humble heiress exposes millionaire fraud scheme. Photos of Nathan, Alexandra, and Reginald appeared everywhere. They were no longer symbols of success. They were faces of shame. 2 weeks after the event, police arrived at Cole Urban Holdings. Reginald Cole walked out in handcuffs, head down, as television cameras captured the exact moment the untouchable businessman was placed in a patrol car. Nathan was arrested the same day. The charges were clear: fraud against vulnerable persons, forgery of documents, and criminal conspiracy. Reginald tried to claim publicly that dishonest employees had deceived him, but no one believed him. The documents showed his signature in too many places. The transfers came from his accounts. And worst of all for him, more elderly victims began coming forward. People who had once been too afraid to speak, but who found their voice the moment they saw Claire standing tall. Alexandra vanished from the social scene, canceled interviews, deleted photos from her accounts, tried to pin all the blame on her father and Nathan. But leaked messages showed she'd known exactly where those properties came from. In one written months earlier, she told her father, "If the old people won't sell nicely, there are always ways to make them uncomfortable." That sentence followed her everywhere. In every article, every comment, every look from people who once admired her. She eventually moved to another city where no one knew her name. But the internet doesn't forget. Trevor was summoned by the authorities. He tried to return the money, but it was too late. His name was recorded as an accomplice. The inheritance he wanted so badly never reached his hands, and the Ashworth family, ashamed, quietly erased him from every future gathering. He ended up exactly where he started, alone, broke, without the name he used to flaunt. The lawsuit against Claire was formally dismissed. No appeal, no turning back. Patricia tried to reach her once. She showed up at the River House one afternoon, eyes swollen, makeup smudged. She rang the bell, but it was Dorothy who answered. Patricia tried to step inside, but the old woman blocked the doorway. "I need to talk to Claire, please." Dorothy shook her head. My daughter has nothing left to hear from you. Patricia clasped her hands together. I didn't know Nathan was doing that. I only wanted my son to be happy, to have a better life. Dorothy looked at her with a mix of pity and firmness. You knew enough, Patricia. You knew your son threw my daughter away like garbage. You knew he left with another woman. You knew Claire was suffering, and instead of teaching your son to be a real man, you taught him to step on people who had less than him. Now your son is in prison, and you're alone. That's the harvest of what you planted. Dorothy closed the door quietly, no shouting, no insults, just the dignity of a woman who no longer needed to fight. Patricia stood outside, trembling. She walked back to her boutique, where nobody shopped anymore. The clients who once admired her now crossed the street to avoid her. Her business closed 3 months later. She ended up selling everything and moving into a small apartment, spending her days alone, watching television, regretting having raised a son without a heart. Nathan lost everything. Inside the state prison, he shared a cell with men who looked at him with contempt once they learned his crime. Stealing from the elderly was about as low as a man could go. Even other criminals wouldn't respect him for it. One night, lying on his cold bunk, he remembered Claire's face the day he handed her the divorce papers. He remembered her triumphant smile. No, his own triumphant smile. And now, lying in that dark cell, he understood that day had been the beginning of his own destruction. Claire began rebuilding, not loudly, not with speeches or interviews. She simply went back to work. Walter Hines, the old man who never stopped trusting her, recommended her to other families. One by one, the doors that had closed began to open again. Not all of them, but enough. Claire went back to caring for the sick. She cooked meals again, held wrinkled hands through long nights, and every time someone thanked her, she thought of Margaret. The River House was restored slowly. Claire didn't hire big companies. She hired Walter Reyes, who knew carpentry. She hired Sophia's granddaughter, who was studying design. She hired a local painter who hadn't had steady work in years. It wasn't charity. It was justice. The same people who had been trampled by Reginald's project were now the ones rebuilding the house he never managed to touch. One Saturday afternoon, while sanding down the old window frames, Walter told Claire something she would never forget. You know, I thought my demolished house was the end of my story. But helping you save this one made me feel like I still matter. Claire squeezed his shoulder. You always mattered, Walter. You just needed someone to see it. As a way of showing her gratitude, Claire did 2 things the whole neighborhood witnessed. First, she offered Walter a permanent room in the River House when she learned the apartment he shared with his daughter was falling apart. At first, he refused. I don't want to be a burden, sweetheart. Claire looked at him firmly. Walter, you helped me fix this house when nobody else wanted anything to do with me. Now the house has space, and you need a decent place to live. Don't make me say it twice. The old man accepted, and every morning, waking up in that room with the big windows and wooden floors, he silently thanked the woman who never forgot the people who had helped her. Second, Claire formally hired Sophia's granddaughter as her assistant, with a fair salary and a legal contract. The young woman cried on her first day. I don't know how to thank you. Claire handed her a clean apron and said simply, work hard. That's enough. But that same afternoon, in front of all the workers, Claire said something out loud, making sure everyone understood. You all helped me when everyone else turned their backs on me. Now that I have this house, I want you to know I'm not going to enjoy it alone. This house belongs to people who know what it means to lose everything and rise again. Dorothy moved into the River House 3 months after the event. Claire prepared the room with the best light for her, the one facing the garden. She bought a comfortable chair, put fresh flowers on the nightstand, and every morning while she brought her mother coffee, Dorothy would look out the window and smile, not because of the big house, not because of the money, but because her daughter had finally found peace. One afternoon in April, while Claire watered the plants in the garden, she saw a figure standing on the other side of the gate. It was Nathan. He'd been released on temporary bail while awaiting his final sentencing. He no longer wore expensive suits. He wore worn jeans and a wrinkled shirt. Days-old stubble covered his face, and deep shadows sat under his eyes. Claire turned off the hose and walked to the gate without opening it. Nathan took a shaking breath. Claire, please. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I ruined everything, but I need you to know I never meant to hurt you this much. Claire looked at him without hatred, without love, without anything at all. Then she spoke, her voice like iron. Don't waste your tears on me, Nathan. Save them for the judge. You asked me for a divorce to throw me out on the street, and you ended up imprisoned in your own misery. Look at you. Today you're nothing more than a stranger standing at the gate of my kingdom. Nathan tried to speak, but she raised her hand. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't look for me. Because I am no longer the woman who needed your love to feel complete. Now I am the woman who built her own life on the dignity you tried to take from me. She turned and walked back toward the house. Nathan stood there, watching the woman who once begged for his attention now close the door without looking back. And for the first time in his life, he understood he had lost something he could never get back. 2 weeks later, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. No reduced time. No privileges. 6 months after the hotel event, the river house no longer looked abandoned. The windows gleamed clean under the sun. The garden bloomed with new flowers planted by Claire and Dorothy. The fountain ran again, and in the afternoons, the soft sound of water falling over stone filled the air. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't a museum. It was a home. Claire kept working as a caretaker, not out of desperate need, but because it was what she knew, what she loved. Now she chose who she cared for. She no longer accepted jobs where people treated her like she was invisible. And when one family tried to pay her less than agreed, Claire simply walked away. No arguing, no pleading, just the quiet certainty that her time was worth something. Walter Hines remained her favorite client. One afternoon, while Claire prepared vegetable soup, the old man told her something. You know, when that scandal hit the news, I thought you'd stop coming, that you'd forget about old people like me. Claire set the bowl down and sat across from him. Walter, you never stopped trusting me when everyone else turned against me. Do you think I could forget that? The old man smiled, his eyes wet. That's why God rewarded you, sweetheart. Because you have a good memory, the kind that lives in the heart. The months passed. The river house filled with life. Claire hosted Sunday dinners, inviting Walter, Sophia, Claudia and her father, the granddaughter who now worked with her, and Daniel Ford, who had become a close friend of the family. They weren't lavish parties, just long tables with simple food, real laughter, and people who understood what it meant to lose everything and rise again. One night, after everyone had gone home, Claire and Dorothy sat on the terrace, as had become their habit. The air was cool, and the stars shone brighter than usual. Dorothy squeezed her daughter's hand. Are you happy, sweetheart? Claire thought for a moment. Not all the time. But I'm free, and that's better than any fake happiness. Dorothy smiled. Margaret knew exactly what she was doing when she left you this house. Claire nodded. She didn't leave me a house. She left me a lesson. Dorothy tilted her head. Which one? Claire looked up at the sky. That people can take a lot of things from you. Money, your job, your reputation. But there's one thing no one can take unless you let them go yourself. Dorothy waited. What's that? Claire looked into her mother's eyes. The certainty that you matter. Even when you're alone. Even when people point fingers. Even when everyone says you don't deserve what you have. If you know who you are, nobody can destroy you. They sat together in silence. It wasn't a sad silence. It was full, the way the air feels after a storm passes, smelling like wet earth and new beginnings. Dorothy closed her eyes and sighed. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. More than words can say. Claire kissed her mother's forehead. And I'm at peace, Mom. For the first time in a long time. I'm at peace. The worst anniversary of Claire Bennett's life was not the end of her story. It was the day the woman everyone had discarded began to rise again. Because sometimes the deepest betrayals teach us the greatest lessons, and sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. Claire Bennett was no longer the humiliated wife. She was no longer the accused caretaker. Now she was the woman who saved a house, who honored a memory, who stood up for the forgotten, and who learned to never again ask permission to take up the space she had always deserved. And somewhere among the stars, Margaret Ashworth smiled. If this story touched your heart, give it a like. If you think someone else needs to hear it, share it. If you want more stories about people who never give up, subscribe and turn on the bell. And if you have something to say, leave it in the comments. See you in the next story, because here, the humble always have the last word.